On Tech News Today, we're talking about privacy, the NSA, and mass surveillance. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, recorded Friday, December 12th, 2014. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Personal Capital. With Personal Capital, you'll have many more happy holidays as you grow and protect your wealth with this award-winning financial app. Best of all, it's free. To sign up, go to personalcapital.com/TNT. And by Squarespace. Squarespace recently launched the latest version of their platform, Squarespace 7, which has a completely redesigned interface, integrations with Getty Images and Google Apps, new templates, and an incredible feature called Cover Pages. Try the new Squarespace at squarespace.com and enter offer code TNT at checkout to get 10% off. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. Welcome to the show. I'm Mike Elgan. Jason Cleanthes, how the heck are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Are you having a nice holiday? It's actually December 12th, but we're going to be broadcasting this and making it available for download on Christmas probably, or at least the week of Christmas. And hopefully we're both having a lovely holiday. Who knows? Anything could happen, but let's hope that we are. You know, today is a very special day today because we're covering an extremely controversial issue. For the holidays, we're taking an in-depth look at 5 of the biggest and most controversial stories of the year. And today we're talking about privacy and mass surveillance, something that affects us all. Now, on June 5th, 2013, the UK's Guardian newspaper announced their possession of a trove of NSA documents, which we later learned were collected and leaked by a former NSA contractor named Edward Snowden. The next day, both the Washington Post and the Guardian released PowerPoint slides that revealed an NSA program called PRISM, which involved surveillance via data centers owned by Apple, Google, Microsoft, and others. And since then, new revelations have emerged, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily. And as the facts are reported in the news, it's become clear that the NSA has been conducting previously unimaginable levels of mass surveillance, collecting and recording phone call metadata, social media chatter, and so much more. And we've also learned that spy agencies from the UK, Canada, Europe, and elsewhere have both partnered with the NSA to a certain extent and conducted mass surveillance of their own. As a result, mass electronic surveillance has become one of the most controversial stories of the year. Joining us to talk about this issue are 2 reporters, starting with Julian Hattem from The Hill. Julian Hattem, I'm sorry. How you doing, Julian?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Mike.
Thank you for being here. And we've also got Grant Gross with IDG. How are you doing, Grant?
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right, Grant, let's start with you, and let's start with the basics. The NSA is a spy agency whose mission includes eavesdropping on communication systems to gather intelligence about what our enemies are doing. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Don't we want spy agencies listening in on people's conversations?
We do, to a certain extent. It depends on the persons who we're listening to, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during the Cold War, as a student of political science, I recall being shocked to learn that the United States used to send submarines down to the bottom of the ocean to actually clamp on to undersea cables to listen into Russian phone calls, essentially. And I was just like, wow, that is just really astonishing. But this is what the NSA exists to do. And it's just in recent years that they've been able to combine the enormous amount of chatter that's been going on the internet with the new science of big data, being able to process huge amounts of information to glean the sorts of information and knowledge that they're looking for. And so it's really a whole new world for the NSA, but in a way it isn't. They've always conducted surveillance and as mass as they possibly could, given the technology of whatever era they're operating in. Now, let me ask you, Grant, one more basic question, and I don't know if you can answer this or not. I don't know if any of us can. But does the NSA's mass surveillance actually work? Does it stop terrorism?
There's a lot of disagreement about whether it does or not. There's very little evidence on the record that it has thwarted any real serious terrorist plots. But backers of the surveillance programs continue to insist that it helps. I just don't know how we can quantify how much it helps. I think it probably helps something, but it's hard to kind of define that.
It's really important for everyone to understand what the NSA is trying to accomplish. It's really kind of a breathtaking mission that they have. Unlike police work, what police do is when a crime is reported or discovered, they conduct investigations to figure out who done it. That's what police have always done. What the NSA is doing is pre-crime. It's like a Steven Spielberg movie, and they're trying to actually know what's going to happen before it happens and then prevent it from happening. And so it requires an enormous amount of effort and intelligence. And the question is how to go about that without violating the rights of Americans. Now, Julian, Google's Eric Schmidt said that NSA surveillance threatens to, quote, break the internet. And there's no question that public awareness about mass surveillance has hurt technology companies. We've seen some business by European companies move to Europe. We've seen actions by Russia insisting, for example, that data on Russian citizens be housed within Russia now, and they don't trust it on servers that are on, within the United States. The question is, two questions. First of all, is Eric Schmidt right? Does the NSA surveillance, do you think, threaten to break the internet? And how bad is the damage to the American technology sector?
So you're absolutely right. This is a huge concern for tech companies. The way that it could break the internet, as Eric Schmidt said, is because a lot of these countries in Europe, South America, Russia, have seen what Snowden revealed about the NSA and have adopted pretty harsh, or talked about at least, adopting pretty harsh responses to them. For instance, in Russia, you note that there's this there's a rule now, there's a law calling for companies to host data servers in the country, which would effectively allow the government to obtain records from those companies. But internationally, it's also prompted a lot of concern about American tech companies, and it's prompted a lot of people to move away from the Googles and the Facebooks and onto local services of some kind or another. Certainly, a lot of that has been kind of propped up from local governments, a way to prop up the local companies and to redirection there. But it's very much a concern for companies, and Google, we should say, is going to be okay. Really, the big concern for a lot of companies that I've talked to is smaller cloud computing companies who may have a number of clients but are not Google. They say that this is really hurting them massively. They used to have a fair amount of international clients, and now that's really dropped off. And there are some estimates that this is in the billions of dollars over the next couple of years. But really the concern is that it's not just what's happening right now and people deciding how they're going to buy cloud computer companies now and for the next year or two, but what's going to happen in the future and whether this will lead to a quote-unquote balkanization of the internet, which is where the internet is effectively walled off within certain countries. And that would be a real concern. And it would just, the theory goes and the concern is, kind of undermine the entire integrity of the internet as an open platform, as an open global system around the world.
Yeah. Now, one of the weird things about all this is that when the revelations first hit, they're sort of gained this perception which was based in some reality, that the technology companies in Silicon Valley and elsewhere were cooperating with the NSA and essentially just handing over data. And Grant, I want to ask you about a story you wrote, I think it was published today. Eric Schmidt of Google said that he was personally shocked by the NSA revelations and that Google moved immediately to lock down data on its servers after these revelations hit. Can you talk about what it is that he said?
Well, he talked at a surveillance conference today and talked about how Google moved very quickly to encrypt traffic between their servers as a result of these revelations by Edward Snowden. He said they had expected that there would be some ways to sniff that traffic, kind of complicated ways to do that, but they were surprised at kind of how directly the NSA and its allies in Europe kind of found ways to get to that traffic. And so they moved to kind of end-to-end encryption on Google traffic moving between their servers with 2048-bit encryption. And he says now that they're a lot safer than they were, a year and a half ago.
Let's take a break. In just a sec, we'll come back to our discussion, but I want to tell you first about one of our sponsors, Personal Capital, which will help you get your financial house in order. And you don't have to do it at your desktop. They have a fantastic set of mobile apps, and they even have an Android Wear app that will alert you when you need to take action on your money. In fact, I've used that app. It was one of the first Android Wear apps ever to be developed. It was right out of the gate. It was already available, and it's already saved me money. The first time I tried the app, I got a little buzz on my wrist, and it told me that I was about to be charged $35 as a sort of penalty, a fee from my bank. I didn't see it on my desktop. I didn't get that notification anywhere else. I got it on my wrist because of Personal Capital, and I saved $35 right off the bat. That's pretty cool if you consider the fact that Personal Capital is free. So it's already making money, essentially. I would have lost that fee. And of course, the notifications and the advice and all that just keeps coming with Personal Capital, and it continues to be free. It's absolutely fantastic. Set up your free account. Go to personalcapital.com/TNT. Personal Capital is free, and it's the smart way to grow your money. And we thank Personal Capital for their support of Tech News Today. You know, you both cover politics heavily, obviously, and so you know better than most that there's a reality somewhere. There are facts that exist somewhere, and then there's the public perception, which is really what politicians have to deal with more than the facts themselves. They really have to manage what the perception is, and the perception remains that the technology companies are too cooperative with the NSA, but within Washington, D.C., there's a sense that they're not nearly cooperative enough. Apple has moved to lockdown encryption. Google, as we've learned, is trying to lock down their data. They seem to be, the big tech companies seem to be doing all they can to prevent the NSA and other agencies from doing mass surveillance. What we can't know is exactly what the NSA is capable of. I mean, this is an organization that exists to do things that sound impossible, to crack codes, to break encryption. This is why they exist. And anybody who tells you that they know what the NSA is capable of is not telling the truth, or they're deluded, because we don't know and we can't know. But still, the politics around this is actually very, very interesting. And Julian, you did a fantastic job of covering the whole USA Freedom Act situation. Now, can you tell us what the USA Freedom Act was and why it failed?
Sure. So the USA Freedom Act was a bill that, when it worked its way through Congress over the last year and a half or so, it was introduced a couple of months after Snowden's leaks last summer. And effectively, what it would have done is stopped the NSA's what's called the bulk collection of so-called metadata about cell phones, about phone calls writ large, rather, which is basically who people call, how long they talked for, the numbers going in and out, but not actually recording your calls or the content of those conversations. It would also have adopted some new transparency measures and given some companies some new ways to report the amount of information that they have to hand over to the government, because that's another one of their concerns, is that not only are they sometimes accused of complying with the NSA or other intelligence agencies, but there are some times in which there is a court order for them to give over information, but because the way that the law is structured, they can't tell people that they had to give information over, which hurts their integrity and hurts their perception in the market. So it would have ended that. It would have created a civil liberties advocate on the secret court that approves these types of orders. And it would have required the NSA, instead of collecting phone records itself, it gets a court order and then asks phone companies, Sprint, Verizon, etc., to give them records individually per each query. There was a fair amount of support. It worked its way through the process, which is long and lengthy and is never clean here in Washington. But eventually it came out, and there was a vote in the House on a slightly watered down version that a lot of people ended up opposing. And then for the last couple of months, there had been this fight in the Senate about whether or not it would get taken up, and if so, what it would look like, whether it would be a weak bill that ultimately did nothing, whether it would meet some of these concerns from technology companies and from civil liberties advocacy groups, or if, on the other hand, it would, as defenders of the NSA had worried, if it would cripple the agency. And effectively what happened is just a couple of weeks ago here in the Senate, it finally hit the floor. It was a big coup. It was a big success for Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat from Vermont, who wrote the bill and really tried to push it. But then it failed. It had to meet a 60-vote threshold in order to overcome a filibuster, and it got just 58 votes. All but one Democrat supported it, and it got the support of a couple of Republicans. And so there's a lot of concern over that, and a lot of kind of head scratching, a lot of for folks here who had fought really, really hard for this bill over the last year. There was this existential moment, almost you could say, that this thing that they'd fought really hard for died. And it's going to come up again next year because the way that the NSA law works, a provision has to be considered by next June, or else the program itself will die, which the NSA officials in the Obama administration say would be awful. So it's going to come up again, and it's going to be interesting because it exposes some really interesting, especially from a political point of view, some fractures among potential 2016 candidates. For instance, Rand Paul, who's been really, really out front on a lot of civil liberties things, did not vote for this bill. He voted to filibuster it. He said it didn't go far enough, which I think if you ask most people, the odds that anything stronger will get through seem pretty, pretty dim. But he did not vote for it. Ted Cruz, who has not been out in front on this issue, he did vote for it. He was just one of the handful of Republicans who did support it. And Marco Rubio also voted against it. So a lot of these potential 2016 people who might want to represent themselves and adopt the mantle of the civil libertarian, they're going to be fighting over this in the next couple of months. So it's going to be back in Congress. But in what form, it remains to be seen, and exactly how that turns out in a Congress that now will be controlled in both chambers by Republicans. It's going to be a fight. And as a reporter, I think it'll be interesting to watch, but it remains to be seen how it's going to turn out.
So just to summarize, and of course, this sounds like madness from Silicon Valley, where it seems like obviously it should have passed. Essentially, you have a majority of Congress that approved it, 58% essentially, and then you have a filibuster, which always sounds like a dirty trick, and then you have the people who shot it down were either thinking that it wasn't strong enough or that it was too strong, and which makes you think, well, then it sounds pretty good. If the people on the extremes are against it and everybody in the middle is in favor and it's a majority, that should be the law. But anyway, that's not how it works in Washington. It's pretty bizarre, kind of frustrating. And even the thing that was going to be passed, as you said, was watered down. It wasn't really all that strong of a measure. And it also has to be said that this is my personal view, but metadata is always put forward as the good kind of data, the safe kind of data. Oh, we're not really listening to your phone calls. We're just seeing who you called, when you called, how long you talked, those sorts of things. But I would guess that the NSA or any other agency or police force would rather have the metadata than the content of calls. When people are breaking the law and planning terrorist attacks, they don't just say, "Oh, do you have the bombs ready?" Blah blah blah. They speak in code, and so the content of calls are not nearly as valuable as the metadata. The metadata tells you everything. It shows you this web of connections between people. It shows so the idea that metadata is some kind of like innocuous form of data is ridiculous. It tells you almost everything that you need to know to figure it out sometimes. Okay, so Grant, Judge Richard Posner of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit Court said recently that the NSA should be completely unfettered in mass surveillance. And why did he say this? Because he said the dangers from terrorism are enormous and that privacy is overvalued. Now, this isn't an opinion you hear very much, but does he have a point? I mean, for the average person, what harm will come to us by being surveilled by the NSA on the one hand, and on the other hand, how horrible are ISIS and other terrorist groups? Does he have a point, do you think?
I mean, he came out in that speech kind of sounded like a grumpy old man. Judge Posner is kind of a smart guy and is a very influential kind of legal mind in U.S. Court system. In that case, he's a little extreme in his view of privacy. His argument is that if you don't have anything to hide, then why do you worry about what the government is listening in on? And I think the U.S. Constitution, the Fourth Amendment, kind of U.S. political the political process for the last 100, 200 years kind of goes against that that philosophy that we as citizens have a right to our privacy unless the government has a very specific need to collect our information. And so I think he's on the extreme of that. But there are certainly those people who argue that and it's true that there are terrorists out there. There's ISIL and other terrorists that really want to do damage to the United States. And I've certainly heard the argument that if the terrorists, I've heard the argument that national security is more important than privacy, because without national security, our privacy rights are gone. We need a country we need a country with the U.S. government protections in place to have privacy. So if they destroy our government, they destroy our privacy as well. But I think that's a rather extreme view of privacy, and I don't think a lot of U.S. residents share that kind of view that Judge Posner had articulated a few weeks ago.
Well, we'll keep talking about this in just a minute, but first I want to take a break and tell you about Squarespace. Squarespace is the place to build a website. You've probably heard about Squarespace if you pay attention to technology, and you know how powerful it is. You know that you can do anything on Squarespace, and you know how beautiful they are. If you've ever seen a Squarespace website, you know the design is always fantastic because of the templates. But for me, one of the most powerful reasons to use Squarespace is that it's super easy to use. They do all the hard work for you. It's so easy to use, but if you do need help, they have tech support 24/7. You can by chat or by email, whatever you want to do. And there are self-help articles and video workshops that you can browse at your leisure. They'll teach you everything you need to know about building a blog or a website, about using their many powerful features. And of course, hosting is included. Squarespace takes care of all the hosting, so you don't have to, and their hosting is absolutely legendary. You can't bring down a Squarespace site because they throw all the processing power necessary when you start getting the big hits. And of course, if you have a runaway success, a viral hit that directs to your website, it's not going to go down because Squarespace is hosting it. And that's the beauty of Squarespace. Start a free 2-week trial with no credit card required and start building your website. When you decide to sign up for Squarespace, make sure you use the offer code TNT to get 10% off and to show your support for Tech News Today, and we appreciate that. And to begin using Squarespace 7, existing customers can go to the Settings tab to activate all the new features. And we thank Squarespace for their support of Tech News Today. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere. We've talked about the Congress. We've talked about the NSA itself. What we haven't talked about is the presidents. And by presidents, I mean President George Bush and President Barack Obama. And this is one of the rare issues, political issues, where you have presidents one president from each party who has done enormous amounts to support NSA mass surveillance. And so you can't really have one side pointing at the other. Both sides can point at both sides. But when President Obama was running against President Bush, he seemed to be extremely against mass surveillance. Let's have a look at candidate Barack Obama.
This administration also puts forward a false choice between the liberties we cherish and the security we provide. I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are. And it's not what is necessary to defeat the terrorists. The FISA court works. The separation of powers works. Our Constitution works. We will again set an example for the world that the law is not subject to the whims of stubborn rulers and that justice is not arbitrary. This administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not. There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
Okay, so I'm being corrected in the chat room. Yes, of course, he was running against John McCain, not President Bush, but he was criticizing the Bush administration for their practices regarding surveillance. Julian, President Obama this month renewed the NSA spying program after the reform bill failed. And is this the contradiction, if we look at the candidate Obama and President Obama, is this the contradiction that it appears to be, or am I missing something?
This is certainly not the only issue on which Obama has been accused of backing off some of his earlier rhetoric from 2008. But yeah, absolutely. This is one of the things that he's been hammered on. He's, as you saw in that speech, he was a very vocal critic of the Bush administration's intelligence policies and oversight in this way. And while he certainly changed a lot of these policies, he has continued them in a way that I think a lot of his supporters were very, very displeased to see. It should be said, though, that in light after the Snowden revelations came out last summer, he did call for a couple of changes to the NSA, some of which he has said demanded congressional action, and some of which he's taken on his own. For instance, with the phone metadata program that we briefly talked about, he's ordered the agency to go to get a court order before obtaining a record, even from its own warehouse. He's also limited those searches to two hops or connections, so person A to person B to person C, as opposed to previous standard of 3. He can take those on his own, but to do more things, he has said he'd give a big speech nearly a year ago at this point, saying that Congress needs to step up to the plate here as well and follow through. So it's a mixed bag, certainly. This is not where I think a lot of his more civil libertarian supporters would have liked to see him be. But I don't want to say that or give the impression that he has done absolutely nothing on this issue, because he certainly has. But I think it's a lot of folks would say it's a half step and really not a half step at best.
So, Julian, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to make a prediction. The NSA's legal authority to collect and search Americans' phone calls is set to expire on June 1st. Will NSA supporters in Congress get that authority renewed? What do you think?
Yes, probably. I think that the odds are good. I think this is a big national security issue. While Congress is really, really good at not doing things, they tend to come together when a big military thing falls apart or is about to come to the issue. Military and national security, rather. For instance, budget issues are always a big fight on Capitol Hill, but the national defense spending bills, usually while there's a fight, they always end up coming together in the end. I think that there is certainly going to be a fair amount of opposition to this NSA bill, and there's going to be, I think, I'm not a betting man. If I were to be a betting man, probably there's going to be some bill with a fair amount of reforms in it. I think it's probably going to disappoint a lot of the people who had pushed for something really robust and a lot of big changes to the NSA, but something will get through. I have been led to believe that something will get through in the first couple of months of next year. I think it's certainly going to be a fight to see what it looks like and to see how we get there. But, well, even though Congress is not good at doing stuff, I think this is something that they will end up coming together and do when the time comes for it, I think.
Well, I wouldn't take that bet. I think you're probably exactly right, Julian. So Julian Hattem is at thehill.com. You can follow him on Twitter at JMHattem. That's Hattem with 2 T's in the middle. Thank you so much for joining us, Julian.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and we also heard from Grant Gross, who's at idg.com and also idg.net. Any IDG domain will pretty much work. And you can follow him on Twitter at Grant Gross. Thank you so much for joining us, Grant.
Sure.
All right. Thank you so much. And I want you to subscribe to Tech News Today. It comes right to you, right to your phone, right to your desktop, wherever you want to get it. You can subscribe on Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Feely, Yahoo, RSS. So many ways to subscribe. Just go to twit.tv/TNT. You can follow us on Twitter at Tech News Today TV. And please send us your thoughts and opinions about this issue and anything you want to talk about to TNT at twit.tv, or you can call us at 260-TNT Show. And please don't miss our evening newscast, Tech News Tonight, every weeknight, right here on the Twit Network. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.